Hi, you're in Module 1 for the 7-step sales, and right now I want to talk to you about what is selling. I know that we all think we know what selling is. I know we all think that selling is selling whatever product or service that we have to offer, but I've got a different take on it for you, and I think this would be a good foundation to start off this course. So to me, when I say what is selling, what I'm actually talking about is defining it. And so, to me, the way I define it is in its broadest sense, selling is a process that brings about your desired change in your prospect, right? In other words, you don't want your prospect to engage in the same behavior they engage with in every other salesperson they meet with when you're working with them, right? You want to change this behavior. And you want to change this behavior and so that they will buy from you. And what I suggest to you is you consider a needs-based approach with your prospects. So we all know that a habit is something that people do repeatedly over and over. It's ingrained in us. So here's what happens with a habit is you have a cue. So think of a telemarketer. When a telemarketer calls you up, if your name is Bob Smith, how many of your family, friends, and relatives call you up and say, can I talk to Bob Smith? Nobody, right? So if someone calls you up and says, can I talk to Bob Smith? What do you know right off the bat? You most likely know that they're a salesperson, don't you? So here's what happens. When they say Bob Smith, that cues a routine in you. And your routine might be, I'm busy, I'm not interested, I'm just leaving to go to the store, I got to take my kids to school, I've got something on the stove. Whatever routine it triggers in you. And you use that routine because the last time you used that routine, it got the salesperson off the phone, didn't it? So when you used that routine and they got off the phone, that rewarded you. And that reward created a craving for you to repeat that routine the next time you got that same cue. And that's what you have to do. You have to learn how to change the process where people understand and will listen to what you have to say. So in its broadest sense, your selling is a process that brings about a desired change in the behavior of your prospects, and I suggest you use a needs-based approach. So let's talk about what your role is. I know what we think our role is. We think our role is to sell the product, right? So our role is to find a prospect, uncover a need, present the product, and write the contract. That's what we think our role is. But I think our role might be all of that, but I think I have a little different twist on it. I think our role is to sell the problem that people have so that they have an interest in us telling them what the solution is. But there's a few things we have to sell before we present the solution. And the first thing we have to do is we have to sell ourselves, right? So our primary function is to disturb the prospect. If they're not disturbed, if they don't think they have a problem, if they're not uncomfortable about the problem that they have, and if they're not willing to do anything about the problem they have, they're probably not going to be the least bit interested in anything you have to say. You have to disturb the prospect. Everybody thinks we want to get along with them, we want to be likable. All that's true. But we have to disturb the prospect. The other thing we have to do is we have to remove complacency. That's why I hate the word quote. Any of you have been on my trainings before, you know I can't stand the word quote. Now, why, if you haven't heard it before, why do I hate the word quote? Well, have you ever gotten in a car wreck? When you get in a car wreck, your insurance agent tells you to do what? Go out and get 2 or 3 quotes, right? Have you ever gotten new carpet in your house? Do you get 2 or 3 quotes for carpet? Have you ever got your house painted? Do you ever get 2 or 3 quotes for the painting? Let me ask you this. Why do you get that first quote? Do you get that first quote for the purpose of making a buying decision? Or do you get that first quote for the purpose of comparing to the next quote? Well, if you said for the purpose of comparing to the next quote, I agree. So if we know that the prospect is going to take our quote and compare it to the next quote, why don't you just finish the sentence? Let me give you a quote because I know you're not buying today. See, we have to remove complacency. The other thing we have to do is we have to uncover the source of dissatisfaction. It's not just enough that they're not happy. It's not just enough that they don't like what they have, the product or service. They have to be satisfied enough to want to change. It's called inspirational dissatisfaction. They have to be inspired to do something different. And that means that we have to instill a desire for changing the status quo. And we can't change the status quo by telling them how great our product or service is. we have to change the status quo by having the prospect tell us how bad their product and service is and why it's a problem for them. And then we have to offer an intelligent and acceptable solution to the problem they say they want to solve. That's why I say you got to sell the problem and you tell the solution. And when you do that, you affect a decision to buy from you today. That's the salesperson's role. It's not to be necessarily likable. It's not to get along. It's not to have them want us to come back 2 or 3 times. That's not what our role is. Our role is to disturb, remove complacency, uncover sources of dissatisfaction, and instill a desire for changing the status quo by offering an intelligent and acceptable solution so that affects a decision to buy. So exactly what is prospecting? Well, I think prospecting is selling. So what are you selling when you're prospecting? I think the first thing you have to do is you have to sell yourself. You have to be the kind of person that they're willing to listen to. You have to come across as the kind of person they're willing to disclose personal information to. And if you're not an approachable kind of person, if you're not the type of person that they can relate with, they'll probably never share anything with you. But once you sell yourself, then you have to sell the interview. You have to sell them on the problems they have so they ask you how they can solve it. You don't sell the interview by saying, I can save you money, I can save you time, I can get you a better product and better price. Because that's the same thing every other salesperson says to the prospect. So if every other salesperson says to the prospect, I can save you time, I can save you money, I can get you a better price and get you a better product, then what makes you different than every other salesperson? So you have to sell the interview. And selling the interview means that you ask questions. When you're selling yourself, you ask questions. You tell them what problems you solve for people, and you ask the prospect what problems they have that they haven't got a solution to so that they want you to meet with them. And then you have to sell your professionalism, and you do that by the way you ask questions. You know, people like 2 things. They like to hear their name, and they like to have their opinion asked. So when you ask people's opinion, and they give you their opinion, people are more likely to act on their judgment, what they think, than they are on what you think. And then you sell your company. And it's only then that they're interested in your company. If they're not interested in you, they will never be interested in your company. If they're not willing to meet with you and have an interview with you, they are never going to be interested in your company. And if they don't see you as the kind of professional that they would be willing to do business with, who cares about your company? So prospecting is selling, but it's selling yourself. It's selling the interview, it's selling your professionalism, and then they're interested in your company. Listen, everybody tunes into WIFM radio. You know what that is, right? You've heard that before. Prospects tune into IFM radio, which is what's in it for me. They're not interested in you, your company, your product, or your price. They're interested in what benefit is to them and why they should even listen to you, why they should consider you, why your product or service is a solution for a problem they actually want to solve. So you have to think from the prospect's point of view. That's the only way you're going to uncover the information that triggers the prospect's buying motive. So we have to understand the way the prospect buys. That's what helps us succeed. Understanding the way the prospect buys. Understanding their buying habits. So simply put, understanding the prospect buying motive doesn't accomplish anything. We have to figure out the buying motive and then use these motives to help the prospect buy. That's the skill that you have to design, to build. You have to understand the prospect's buying motive and then be able to use those buying motives to help the prospect buy from you. So how do you do that? Well, let's start off with prospecting. When you work a prospect and invest your time, energy, and resources into getting in front of a prospect, 3 things can happen. You show an immediate profit. In other words, you make a sale, they buy from you right then. You show a loss, so you didn't make the sale. But let me tell you something, if you don't make the sale, do you think you should spend an hour with a prospect and then find out they're not going to buy from you? Or do you think you should have a way to find out if they're not going to buy from you right up front? And that's one of the things I'm going to teach you in this lesson, or in this course. There's a way to find out right up front, real fast, if they're going to buy from you or not. Because if you spend an hour with somebody and they're not going to buy from you, you're just wasting your time. And they won't see you as a professional, someone who has value, if you spend all that time with them and then they don't buy from you. And then you created a deferred return. I call that a deferred return because it's a renewal, it's a second appointment. So you can have value in a prospect that way, although there's a way to really define that second appointment and make sure that it's a real appointment, not a Sears appointment. So I said there's a way for you to find out upfront if it's worth your time to meet with this prospect, so that you don't spend an hour with a prospect and they end up not buying from you. And here's how I define prospect. I started doing this way back in 1998, 99, 2000. And this is how I define a prospect. And if the people that I talk to don't meet this qualification, I would never invest my time to give them a full product presentation. That didn't mean I'm not willing to talk to them, but I would never give a full product presentation. So who are qualified prospects? Well, to me, this may not be you, but to me, a qualified prospect, first of all, they recognize they have a problem. It's not just good enough for them to agree with you that other people have a problem or acknowledge that maybe you solved a problem for other people. They have to recognize that they have a problem. And if they don't recognize they have a problem, nothing else you say or do is going to be of any interest to them at all. It might validate you. You might feel like you're really an intelligent, qualified sales professional. But if they don't buy from you, you're just a professional visitor, right? Or a professional educator. Maybe you educate them enough for them to buy from someone else. I don't want that for you. So they have to recognize they have a problem. But once they recognize, that's why you sell the problem and you tell the solution. But once they recognize they have a problem, then they have to be motivated to solve that problem. So it's not enough for someone to say to me, yeah, you know, you're right, that is a problem. I've had that problem for a long time and it really annoys the heck out of me. I need to find out if they're motivated to solve that problem. Because them recognizing that they have a problem, but they're not motivated to do anything about it, all that's going to do is give me good numbers for prospects that I met with. It's not going to give me an income. And I'm not interested in good numbers. I'm interested in good income. So they have to recognize the problem exists. They have to be motivated to solve that problem. Can you think of what the third thing is? I'll give you a second to think about it. So write that down. They recognize the problem exists. They're motivated to solve that problem. And the third thing is they have to feel like your product will solve their problem. If they recognize they have a problem, but they're not motivated to solve it, you're probably never going to end up showing your product or give them the price. If they recognize they have a problem and they're motivated to solve it, like they're really motivated to solve it, they want to solve it, but they just don't see your product or service as a solution for them, what's the chances they're ever going to buy from you? So we have to be able to make our presentation in a way where they tell us why the features of our product are a benefit to them. Remember, a feature is what a product has or does. A benefit is why they would want that. So we have to figure out how to ask questions in a way that the prospect tells us how the features of our product or service is a benefit for them. So they recognize they have a problem. They are motivated to solve the problem. They feel like that our product will solve their problem. Here's the third thing. They have to qualify for a product. I don't know what it is. Is it health? Is it financing? Well, however they qualify for your product or service, they have to qualify for it. So if you take the time, energy, and resources to get in front of a prospect, and that prospect recognizes they have a problem, that prospect is motivated to solve that problem, and that prospect says to you, your product is perfect for me. Lloyd, I think this is exactly what I need. But they don't have the money, credit, or health to qualify for my product. How much money am I going to make? I'm not going to make a dime, right? I'm not trying to sound mean here, but I'm running a business. I'm not running a popularity contest. I'm not trying to make friends. That doesn't mean I'm not friendly with my prospects or that my customers don't become friendly with me or I become friendly with my customers. But I'm not trying to make friends. I'm trying to get customers. So they have to qualify for my product. So you've already invested the time, energy, and resources to get in front of your prospect. They recognize they have a problem. They're motivated to solve that problem. They feel like your product or service, is the best product for them. But they can't qualify. So you have to find a way to make sure they can qualify for that. And there's ways to ask those questions. That's in one of the other courses, you're going to go through the question asking process. But there's ways to ask questions. And I'm not talking about open-ended questions or closed-ended questions. Those are real basic questions, and we all learn those right from the get-go. There's other ways of asking questions that will tell us pretty good, I mean, with a pretty succinctly that they can or they can't qualify for the product. So they recognize they have a problem, they're motivated to solve the problem, they feel like your product or service is going to solve that problem for them, and they can qualify the product. Now what? What's the next one? You've written those 4 things down. I'll give you a hint. It's something they have to be willing to do. They have to have the money to purchase your product, right? Can you imagine that you spend an hour with somebody that recognizes a problem exists? Woo, thank you for coming out, man. I really appreciate that. This has been a problem for a long time. They're motivated to solve this problem. You know, I want to get this solved by next week. My wife and I have been saying for a long time now, we need to solve this problem. I just want to get it solved. They feel your product or service will do it. This is a fantastic product. I've never seen anything like this. This is one of the best things. I wish we'd seen this 6 months ago. You have done a great job showing this to us. They can qualify for the product. Their credit's perfect. They got the money for it. They got great health. Whatever the qualification, they qualify for it. Oh, we don't have the money put down on it. How much money are you going to make? Not a dime, right? So you have to have a way to find out if they have the money to actually purchase your product. I gave you a hint a minute ago. So you've already put the money, energy, and resources out to meet with the prospect. They recognize they have a problem. They're motivated to solve the problem. They feel your product or service will solve their problem. They can qualify for your product. They have the money to purchase your product. And there's one other thing that's critical that they have to have. Can you think about what that is? So you got 5 things down here now. There's one more. Can you think about what that is? What's one more? They have the money to purchase your product. What's one more thing? Come on, you got it. You got to trust yourself. You know what it is. You're right. Good job. Good job. They're willing to spend the money to purchase your product to solve their problem. So they've got the money to purchase it, but they have to be willing to spend that money to solve their problem. Just because they've got the money doesn't mean they're willing to spend the money. So in order for me to do a complete product presentation with someone, I have to make sure that they recognize they have a problem, they're motivated to solve that problem, they feel like that my product or service will solve the problem, they can qualify for the product, they have the money to purchase the product, and they're willing to solve that product. I mean, they're willing to purchase that product to solve their problem. There's one last thing. I know I'm throwing a lot out there. There's one last thing. Can you think of what it is? They have to be willing to spend the money to purchase that product today. That doesn't mean that I don't need to eat next Christmas too. But I'm here today. If I told them that it's important for them to get today, and then I agree with them that they can wait 3 months, then I just lied to them. It's not really important they do it today. They could have waited to begin with. So let's recap. They have to recognize they have a problem. They have to be motivated to solve the problem. They have to feel like your product or service will solve that problem for them. They have to qualify for your product or service, whatever the qualification is for your product or service. They have to have the money to purchase that product, and they have to be willing to spend the money to purchase that product or service to solve that problem. And they have to be willing to spend the money with you today. And in one of the other courses where we go through the questions, we're going to cover exactly how to do it. But that is one of the most important, these are some of the most important steps that you have to get down when you think about what is selling. Now, in order to do this, you have to learn how to build good human relations with people. Prospects will do business with people they like. So be yourself. If you try to be someone you're not, you will be regarded as insincere. Listen, there are prospects that will buy from you and would never buy from me. I don't strike them as that kind of person. We don't like everyone that we talk to. So there's a chance that happens. And that's okay. That doesn't make you a good salesman or a bad salesman. That just means that you're doing exactly what you need to do. You need to talk to enough people. Salespeople say to me all the time, I need more qualified prospects. And I tell them in the lead training that we do, maybe you need more qualified prospects, but I doubt it. What you probably need are more prospects to qualify. And this is one of the reasons right here. Not everybody you talk to, you're going to be their cup of tea. Know your products. This is a sales strength. It promotes confidence. And I don't just mean know the features of your products. You need to know the benefits. Why are those features a benefit to your prospects? If you can't list 3 features of your products and then list 3 benefits, 3 reasons that's a benefit to your prospect, they will probably never buy from you. In order to do this, you have to have the ability to develop good human relationships. And then you have to expect the best from your prospect. I'm not interested in ruling people out. I want to rule people in. So I try to ask questions that give me the opportunity to find the people that are most likely to buy from me most of the time. And in order to do that, I've got to have this good foundation as a sales professional. So I do not answer questions in a way that creates new ones. I reinforce the prospect's emotional decision to buy from you with logic. People buy on emotion, they're moved to action by logic. Remember, you don't catch logic, you catch enthusiasm. So don't answer a question in such a manner as to create new ones. Reinforce the prospect's emotional decision to buy from you with logic. I'll give you an example. You bought a car before, right? When you buy a car, you take it for a test drive. Now, before you leave the dealer's lot, you're sitting behind the steering wheel, the car salesman sitting next to you. Before you leave the dealer's lot, do you adjust anything? You adjust the steering wheel, you adjust the radio, the air conditioning, roll the window up and down, fix the rear view mirror. Here's my question for you. Why are you adjusting those things? Aren't you adjusting those things to make the car fit you? Then you take the car for a test drive. You come back to the dealer. You get out of the car. If you like the car, when you get out of the car, where do you go? Do you go inside the dealership with the salesman? Of course you do. Here's my question for you. When you go inside the dealership with the salesman, are you going in there for the purpose of making a buying decision? Or are you going in there to discuss which car you're buying? You're going in to discuss how much you're paying for that car, right? That's why you're going in there, not to discuss which car you're buying. And the reason you're going in there to discuss how much you're paying for that car is you've already taken emotional ownership over the car. So to have a good foundation, you have to don't answer questions in a way that creates new ones. Reinforce the prospect's emotional decision to buy from you with logic. People buy on emotion and move to action by logic. Develop a positive emotion without arousing negative ones. It's okay for people to buy for their reason. They don't have to buy for your reason. They can have their own reasons for buying. So I'm not looking to rule people out. I'm looking to rule them in. I validate what they say. I give them I respond emotionally if their objection is an emotional objection, and I respond logically if their objection is a logical objection. And in the Handling Objection course, we're going to show you exactly how to do that. So now that I've got a good foundation, there's something else I have to have. I have to understand the difference between sympathy and empathy. And there's a huge difference. I see salespeople missing this all the time. Empathy means trying to see, hear, and think like the other person. Empathy is understanding a person, looking from the inside out as he or she does. Listening is the key skill for acquiring this kind of understanding. Listen, a fire extinguisher salesman went into a hardware store. There was a guy behind the counter. The store looked a little disheveled. Some of the shelves were a little bit empty. The fire extinguisher salesman gave his pitch, and the hardware store owner held his hand up and said, whoa, wait a minute, you don't understand. There's no way I can afford to buy your fire extinguisher system for my store. About 4 months ago, I got in a car wreck, and I had my wife and son in the company truck. Now, you know that Home Depot came in about 3 miles down the road here a couple of years ago, and I really lost about 60% of my business. In fact, my wife quit paying the car insurance because we couldn't afford to pay it and run the store. She also quit paying our health insurance because we couldn't afford to have health insurance and run the store. And about 4 months ago, I wasn't paying attention, and I rolled through a stop sign, and I hit a truck. And that truck was a plumbing truck. My wife was injured. My son was injured. They were both in the hospital. My wife was in intensive care for about 10 days. We've got all kind of health insurance bills. I'm being sued by the guy from that owned the plumbing truck, not only for the damage to his truck, but for loss of income. You see, there's no way I can afford your fire extinguisher system. And without pausing, the young fire extinguisher system salesperson reached down his briefcase, pulled out part of the mechanism, got a drill, walked up to a wall, and started to drill that fire extinguisher system into the wall. The hardware owner said, whoa, 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 what are you talking about? What are you doing? I just told you I can't afford to buy this system. And with more experience, with more wisdom that this young salesman should have had, he turned around and he said, with all the financial problems you have, the cost of this fire extinguisher system isn't going to affect your way of life in any way, shape, or form. But if you lose your store because it burns down, it will affect your lifestyle. You see, that fire extinguisher salesman understood how the prospect felt, but it didn't change the facts. That is empathy. Sympathy is I understand how you feel. I felt the same way. I don't want you to feel that way. I'll come back in 3 months. That's the difference between sympathy and empathy. So we've gone through the first course where we talked about what is selling. So move on to your next lesson. Trust yourself. Be willing to make mistakes. Learn and work consistently. And we'll see you on the next lesson.